Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Athletic Development UK podcast with myself, Chris Honor. So we're at the business end of the season now. The season's just finished, pre-season's about to start, and one thing that a lot of coaches, agents, and other people in general don't think about is the psychological side of the footballer. Because let's face it, they are humans first. And today I'm really buzzing to have an amazing guest who been fortunate to know for quite a while. I've had the pleasure of having him deliver some lectures to my former teams. He's a world-renowned performance coach, NLP trainer, award-winning author. It's the man himself, Mr. Jimmy Petruzzi. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for that build up. I'll give you that $5 later for that build up.
Happy days, mate. I'm happy with that.
yeah. Brilliant. Thanks for that. Yeah, good to speak to you, Chris. It's always a pleasure speaking to you, mate.
Absolutely brilliant stuff. Yeah, same likewise. It's really good. It's always good to see you what you're doing in the pipeline, because obviously, you've been involved with the game for numerous years, at various levels. Obviously, we're both working together at Bacup Borough, a team on the rise, and you're just implementing pre-season training, I believe, at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely, and we're really looking forward to it. We've had a meeting like yesterday, and yeah, it's exciting times. Obviously, it's great to have you involved, Chris. You bring a wealth of knowledge, to the game, and I think it's a huge asset to the club to have someone like yourself involved in, not just in terms of the recruitment side, but as a sounding board as well, in terms of the physical side as well. But yeah, I mean, it's really positive. The last couple of seasons, it's been a bit of a challenge, obviously, with the pandemic. It's been on and off, and this season we had a good run in it, but sort of we go back to a couple of seasons or so ago. We started pre-season, we were flying, and we got our blocks off on the flyer, and obviously the pandemic hit, we stopped, and then we kind of started again. And we got a season, the last season we got the full season done, but I suppose there was never really a true barometer where we're up to, because you had this sort of bit of stop-start. But now we start again, beginning of pre-season. We're at it in a couple of weeks, and I feel really positive. A lot of positive stuff, and obviously, Brent has a way of playing, Dave has a way of playing, Felgate, and for me, I can only compliment in terms of the work I do to provide the players physically and mentally good to go, and obviously, you all, as you all know, and as a lot of our sort of audience will know, Brent Peters' teams are winners. They're fighters. They're resilient, and then you sort of add the likes of Felgate, who's got a vast amount of experience working in the professional game. Experience as a player and as a coach. It's an eclectic mix, really, of sort of experience, and I think that it's a really exciting time to be involved in the club.
Yeah, 100%. And one of the key things, obviously, that you're bringing to the club is the psychological element and the mental health stuff, as well as obviously being the fitness coach down at Bacup as well. But it's not just there where you're having an impact, and you're looking at all the work that you've done previously in terms of you've written books, you're doing a lot of consultancy work, you're doing lecturing across the world, which you can't ignore that, because it's absolutely outstanding. I mean, just give us a brief insight, Jim, if you don't mind, in terms of what your week tends to look like in terms of.
Yeah, it's a good question, really. It's quite a diverse week. I'm a lecturer, first and foremost, I lecture, and basically, it's sort of privileged to sort of have that role, and outside of that, I do radio, as no doubt some of the audience will know, and I've managed to interview some of the world's best people in their field, in sport, and also in field psychology. I've interviewed yourself, obviously, a few times, Chris, as well. It's been great having the show, and that's a great opportunity, because for me, it's almost educational in itself, because the sort of questions I ask, for the listeners to get an insight into people's professions, but also I'll sort of, truthfully, sometimes just take a few notes myself, because we're always learning. I'm a lifelong learner. So I also have a stable of players. as well that play on variable levels of the game, and sort of that's great. That sort of keeps me busy, and I help them prepare mentally and physically. I help and sort of oversee the mental skills development of the Australian Cycle Academy. It's produced some sort of world-class players on the world stage. They've produced international players, and that's been great. I've been doing that for a long time, so I have quite a good balance and in what I do. And as you said, I do a lot of writing as well, and I try and get I'm very fortunate to have a really good balance in terms of the work I do, and I really enjoy it. So I suppose there's no real 2 weeks the same, but generally speaking, my week will involve interviewing some of the world's best sports people, athletes, for radio. I lecture as well, and I'll consult individual players, and sort of teams will get in touch, and sort of, I suppose you could call it a think tank or whatever, really, and ask for some of my ideas, and obviously sort of on a weekly basis via Zoom, I sort of keep tabs on the Australian Cycle Academy from a mental perspective, and we do things like performance profiling, mental skills analysis, and just making sure we cover that variable. The work at Bake Up's always excited me. I've had 2 stints at Bake Up. I had one originally, a good few years back. I left because of professional reasons. I just, work took me everywhere around the world. But about 2-3 seasons ago, I came back, and yeah, it's been fantastic being back. The only thing is, obviously, it's the pandemic. It's kind of not giving us the opportunity to have that sort of, really good go at it. But I feel really excited this year because obviously people like yourself have come on board, but equally we've got this clear run-on goal, so to speak, in terms of what we can do. And I'm under no illusions. Obviously, it's not easy. In the non-league, my first stint in non-league was a big wake-up call for me, in terms of how challenging it is, how good the level is. Obviously, the challenges that we face in non-league, the players have got jobs, and it's not always easy to implement training schedules because you kind of got to factor all that into consideration. But it's a challenge that I'm up for, that's for sure. And I think that I'd like to think I can bring things that I learned in the professional game, and hopefully complement what goes on, and we'll see what happens.
No, absolutely fantastic. I mean, the good thing with that as well is, when you're in the lower league, when you've been in the professional game, or you're working with professionals like myself on a day-to-day basis, and then you're having to sort of juggle that to help impact those that maybe haven't had the right opportunities yet. It's trying to find that balance, isn't it? As to understanding, what your value is and what you can bring to the table. What motivational skills can you bring to them, but also communicate the fact that as much as you want to help them, you're not there on tap, because ultimately, they've got to be able to produce goods themselves, haven't they? In terms of, they've got to be able to make sure that they've got the time management correct, make sure that they're in the right place at the right time, and what's their mindset like? I mean, in terms of the mindset element of it, of course, now, just reading there, we had a brief chat before we started the show, and Watford have just released 28 players, which I find absolutely astounding. And then you add on top of that, I think when the pandemic hit, over 1,000 players had been released from the 92 I think it's EFL clubs and Premier League clubs, if not more. From sort of your side of experience, I mean, how would you sort of handle that in terms from a coaching perspective?
I mean, it's not easy. I don't think there's any sort of simple solutions to complex problems. It is difficult, and I feel for the players, and obviously they've got their goals. They want to become a professional player. They've got their heart on that, and the reality is only so few could make it. I mean, at the top of my head, the last time I sort of looked, I think it was 0.01 make it in the Premier League, or I don't remember the stats. People can sort of do their own research, but obviously it's a very small percentage people make it, and even smaller percentage actually stay in the game. It's not easy, and I've always been a big advocate when I've worked in the professional game as well with teams. I've always sort of banged on about education. I've had a number of roles in the professional game, over the course of many years, and one of them being on the education side. It's always been, okay, it's important you do your education, important you do your course, you get released, you might be able to go up to the States to do a scholarship, or, you might sort of, go to uni here. But I've always been a big believer in education, Chris, in terms of them learning, and because you look at the percentages and it's like any competitive environment, there's only so many places available, and pretty much everyone wants to be a professional footballer. I think there's a lot of great things happening in the UK. I have been for a long time. I think that in sport in general, in GB in Great Britain, we've seen it translate on a world stage. I think GB punches above their weight in the Olympics. We've seen that, finishing that top 3 or 4. Considering where they were in, say, 96, for example, won a medalist. So there's a lot of great work that's being done, and there's no two ways about it. But equally, there's still a lot of work to do, and one can't rest on their laurels. I think, certainly football, you want to get the balance in football. You want to give the players an opportunity of being released, obviously, to sort of, look after their welfare so they can bounce back and sort of, integrate themselves, whether they go back in the game, whether they end up sort of, doing a role outside the game. So you want to have that available, but equally in saying that, professional sport is about winning. That's how we're judged, Chris, and you know what it's like in professional sport. At the end of the day, it's about winning, really. And I've been vocal over the years, as a lot of people know. Some of the things that were going on in years gone by, like non-competitive sport in schools and prizes for losers, and for me it devalues that. And there is a place for that in recreation, absolutely. There is a place for helping sort of players, but it is what it is, and you can't go into the game with any illusions. So I think probably a lot more can be done in terms of in the way of supporting players, albeit I think there's a lot of good things that have been done, but where do you draw a line? How much can you do? I think for me, the transition, you've been released, you've got a plan, and that plan for me should sort of, there should be some sort of contingency. People working with the players on the basis that 0.1 are going to make it professionally on the Premier League. So the chances are tough. So you always encourage, well, I do anyway, my players, or the academy lads, or going to Australian soccer, the chances are, these are the chances that you're making it. So you want to believe because you can. Why not you? Give yourself the best chance to make it. But equally, it's really important that you take life lessons and use these skills you transfer them in other areas. So I believe that being in that system galvanizes you if it's done properly, even if you don't make it. You should come out of it confident, strong, and be able to transfer those skills to academia, transfer those skills to business. Do you try and go back in the game and sort of have another bite at it? Do you sort of end up doing a scholarship? So you got that outlet, which is key. But that's a fact of life, and everything Chris has got is inherited issues. I'm not the sort of person who's going to get the violin out for players getting released, because it's life. There's single parents up and down the country, working 2 or 3 jobs to bring the kids up, who are getting up 5 in the morning, whose electric bills have gone up, and there are people out there around the world doing it tough. And we're very fortunate in the UK. It's a great country, a lot of opportunities. We do have our challenges like everywhere else, but there are people around the world who work for $1 a day or whatever. So I think for me, it's not about getting the violin out and saying, okay, well, poor footballers type thing, because they've had a great opportunity up until then. A lot of people don't get and will give anything. So what you do is you sort of get the balance. Okay, it's not great, but you put support around it, and that support sort of covers different variables: career, mental health can affect people in different ways, and you give them the best chance to sort of do the best they can in life, which is what we all want, really.
Yeah, it's all about accountability, isn't it? I mean, I think the biggest problem we've got, especially within young athletes, is there's a lot of peer pressure from the parents, because it's not a nice thing to have to say this, but a lot of parents are relying on their 8, 9, 10-year-old son or daughter to use them as a pension pot, which is wrong. And I get it that you know, as a parent, you know, we want to be able to provide the best opportunities. I mean, with work I'm doing at the minute, we've got 8, 9, 10-year-old cricketers, rugby players, footballers, and they're given the right opportunities, which is brilliant. But then, you know, it's about understanding that you've got to just be able to utilize the best facilities that you've got, and I think schools is something that, you know, that need to take a little bit more
Yeah.
from this as well, because you know, they get given X amount of funding a year for improving, you know, PE and improving the reducing the risk of obesity, education, all that sort of stuff. But they don't tend to do it, and a lot of it, I think, is because of lack of education and the lack of knowing where to go for it. But again, you know what?
Absolutely, yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a great point, because you look outside the professional side of things, and you know, you look at general well-being, and you want to tackle obesity, you want to sort of tackle, there's other things too, and I think sports is a great outlet to do that. And I suppose, you know, for sure, and I think that's a really important thing, Chris. I think for me, and how the finance is distributed, who comes on board, you know, the strategy, they're sort of key things. And you know, we know, for example, in mental health, early intervention is key. So you know, introducing things like mindfulness, introducing things, you know, like activity. Not everyone's going to excel at maths and sort of English or science, and I think getting a balance for sure. So absolutely, you know, if you've got, and I know there's a lot of schools doing a lot of good things too, but if you've got, like, you know, extracurricular activities that are available, and I think the point you made there about sort of the parental things, and that's a really important point you've made there, Chris. And for me, it's like I use this analogy. The analogy I use, you know, you see sort of parents at the touchline sort of shouting at their kids, and you wouldn't do that like at a maths exam to your child. You wouldn't do that at an English exam and shout at kids. You know, you got to do well. So I think for me, you know, and a lot of parents have got cognitive biases. You know, you'll know from recruitment, Chris, and you know, I've certainly had it in football where you get a call and they'll tell you that their child can run the 100 meters in 10 seconds and they're 6'12", and they can. And you look at the attributes, you think, well, with those attributes, you should be playing for Real Madrid.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't do the players any favors, you know. It really doesn't. I think to have that extra pressure, because it's tough as it is anyway, you know. And I think for me, yeah, absolutely, some parents need a reality check. You know, for me, let their children enjoy the sport. And I know I don't have, you know, all the answers. I'm a parent myself, and you know, my kids will probably have a different perspective than me. They'll probably sort of watch and say, well, actually, you know what, this is the way it was like. But you know, you want the best for them, and I think for me, yeah, introduce as many things you possibly can. That's really important. But equally, yeah, it's about enjoying it. There are only so many opportunities out there. That's key. You know, I think that sometimes, yeah, as a parent, you've got that extra bit of wisdom to know, well, okay, this is going to serve you well when you get older. Like, you know, sort of encourage martial arts and that sort of stuff and whatever else. But equally, there's going to come a point where they make their own decisions, you know, going forward. And, you know, I know, speaking from experience, obviously, you know, it's one of them. And like my daughter as well, she's, you know, very talented footballer. But for her, like, there wasn't that many opportunities in women's football when she was sort of, you know, at school herself. Things have changed now, and you know, she's sort of plays a bit here and there and does the media stuff and whatever else, and sort of really enjoys that. But you know, speaking from experience, yeah, there's only so many opportunities out there for performers, and I think that's really important. I think in terms of, you know, whilst I don't have a manual and I've got no place to give anyone else any advice in terms of what they should and shouldn't do, I think what's really important to say, you know what, you know, first and foremost, you've got to enjoy the game. That said, I never let any of them win, that's for sure. So both children,
it's not competitive.
If they step on the pitch with me, then that's it. We go into competitive mode. So I can assure you now that you know, and that's for me. That's the sort of fine line, isn't it? I think, you know, sports competitive, life's competitive. Life's not a walk in the park, and I think that, you know, there's a lot to be learned from sport. And going back to the original point in schools, there's got to be a strong, healthy games curriculum where you encourage, competition. You've got a place for recreational activities and that sort of stuff, but you've got to encourage, have a good talent ID program, identify sports people who've got the potential to go all the way, and give them every opportunity to do so. It's really important that you don't sort of miss people out, and not everyone's going to be a world champion, but you give everyone an opportunity to play, to get out there, to enjoy the game. But you've got to get that balance between providing opportunity to enjoy the game, and the variables that you can achieve from enjoying the game. Like, you enjoy, you're out, the endorphins are going, it helps with your obesity, it helps the sort of social activities. But equally, you've got the cream of the top, and you really want to encourage them to be competitive in terms of, because it's unforgiving at the highest level. And I think that, you can support people the best you can, but ultimately that's really important. I think in terms of that, you're right. There are certain sort of parents that maybe even live their dreams for their children, think, okay, well, and that's not a good place to be either, in terms of, everyone's got to choose their own sort of path in life. So it's not an easy balance, really. And I think that it's one of them. It's not revolution, it's evolution. It's got to be revisited. Occasionally, how can we improve? How can we sort of develop? What do we want to achieve? And you've got to get good people like yourself, Chris, and other people involved, and sort of, like review policy, periodically, and think, okay, how do we sort of drive things forward in terms of, helping the community and helping people to become the best they can be.
100%. I think from that, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, because it's just, in terms of what people need to do, self-care, self-value, self-respect, which a lot of people haven't got. But to find out more about your work, Jimmy, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of everywhere, really. It's a good question, really.
In a good way.
Yeah. Sort of, I sort of, it's one of them. I get people say, well, we've sort of, see you on this and seen you on that type thing, and but I suppose, LinkedIn is probably a good place. If they sort of Jimmy Petruzzi on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to sort of add people as a friend or whatever it is that you add them on LinkedIn, so they can sort of. We have a Facebook page, NLP and hypnotherapy training courses as well. But yeah, LinkedIn is fine, the Facebook page. I'm on Twitter, Jim Petruzzi on Twitter as well, so they can get more of an insight in terms of, why I do, if that's what they want to sort of do, and find a bit more about what I do work-wise, then yeah, that's the way to go.
Super. As always, Jimmy, it's been absolutely fantastic to have a catch up as well. And obviously, insight into your world again. So, guys, do get in touch with Jimmy. The guy, he has got a world of experience, and it's a guy that's helped me out a lot and helps a lot of people in the know out. So, get in touch if you need to. All the links will be should be below by now and above his head. So make sure you click on them. In the meantime, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you on the next episode.